Okay, so you're thinking about reading Shatter Me by Mafi, but you're just not sure if it's going to be worth all that time. Well, we're here to help you figure that out. And to do that, I've got an expert with me today. So let's just get straight to it. Is Shatter Me worth reading or what?
It's definitely a book that people tend to have very strong opinions on. You either love it or you hate it. And a big reason for that is the writing style. But first, are you even interested in this type of book? Because it's really targeted at fans of like dystopian YA romances. And even then, there are people who love it and people who hate it.
Right, so we're talking about a pretty specific reader here.
Absolutely. Some readers will find it, really refreshing and empowering. They love how intense the emotions are. And, the romance moves pretty fast. And a lot of people really love that unique way that Mafi uses language. One reader even said, if you want a book with characters that you will not be able to get out of your head and with a plot that will have you reading an entire trilogy in one sitting, this book is your friend.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that sounds like pretty intense.
Yeah.
But you did say this book is divisive. So I'm guessing there's some people who do not agree with that.
Right. Yeah, some readers think that the things other people love about the book are actually what makes it bad. They think it's cliche and kind of tedious to get through, and that the writing is just way too over the top. Like one reader said, and I quote, "This is not a dystopia, it is a romance. This is not a novel, it is a collection of similes and metaphors, most of which do not make sense."
Oh, wow. Okay. Those are both really strong opinions. It seems like we're going to have to break down the writing style to help people decide if this book is going to be for them or not.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we're here to do. We're going to try to equip you with all the info you need about like the writing style and what the story is about and how it compares to other dystopian YA that you might have read already. And then you can decide, if it's something you want to add to your TBR.
Okay, awesome. I'm ready to dive in. So I think the first thing we've got to talk about is that writing style. Because like we said, everyone seems to have a strong opinion about it.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So just be prepared. Because Mafi's writing style is not like anything you've ever seen before. It's super figurative. It relies a lot on metaphors and similes, and also repetition. And some people just love that. They think it's poetic. And that it shows you just how broken Juliette's mental state is. Like you're really inside her head, experiencing the world through her eyes. But other people just can't get past it. They think it's like way too much and that it's confusing and distracting.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I'm usually wary of, flowery writing.
Yeah.
Like, how many different ways can you describe rain? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, for sure. I've got lots. So to describe someone's eyes, she writes, his natural tan offsets a pair of eyes, a shade of blue in a midnight sky.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's descriptive.
Yeah.
But is it actually effective?
It depends who you ask. Here's another one about raindrops. I always wonder about raindrops. It's like someone is emptying their pockets over the earth and doesn't seem to care where the contents fall.
I can see how that would either draw you in or, make you want to stop reading.
Yeah.
It's definitely a bold choice.
Yeah, exactly. And she doesn't just use similes and metaphors. She also uses a lot of strike-throughs, which, can be kind of jarring for people. And she also always writes out numbers numerically instead of spelling them out. Like she would write 4 as 4.
Okay, I mean, that just sounds like a gimmick to me. Is that actually adding anything to the story?
Well, that's what everyone's debating. Some people think it shows how messed up Juliette is, but other people are like, why are you doing this?
Okay, yeah, so I can definitely see why this book is so polarizing. But let's move on from the writing for a second and talk about what the book is actually about. Like, what kind of dystopian world are we entering here?
Yeah, so Shatter Me is about this girl, Juliette, who has this power that can kill people just by touching them. And she's been imprisoned by this government. It's called the Reestablishment, because they're scared of her and they just want to use her as a weapon. But she ends up escaping. And she joins this group of rebels who also have special powers. And it's basically about their fight for freedom against this oppressive government.
Okay, yes, it sounds like pretty familiar dystopian stuff so far. Like, what books would you compare this to?
You're right. It definitely hits a lot of those familiar dystopian tropes, like the oppressive regime, special powers, a chosen one. Think like The Hunger Games, Divergent, even X-Men. Like her power, the fact that she can kill people by touching them, it's really similar to Rogue's power in X-Men, where she absorbs people's powers and memories through touch.
Right. Yeah, I can totally see the similarity. So it doesn't sound like it's breaking a lot of new ground with like the plot or the world building.
Yeah, not necessarily. But what some people really love about Shatter Me is how those familiar elements play out through the characters and their relationships, especially the love triangle.
Oh, okay. A love triangle.
Yeah.
Classic. Tell me more. Who are the characters?
Okay, so there's Adam. He's like the classic nice guy love interest. And he's actually immune to Juliette's touch. They knew each other as kids.
Mm.
And he was like the only one who was nice to her. So he represents like safety and familiarity for her. And then there's Warner. He's like the bad boy. Mysterious past, questionable motives. He's the son of the supreme commander of the reestablishment. But he's like strangely fascinated by Juliette and her power.
Okay, so we've got the good guy versus bad boy thing. I can already see some red flags with Warner.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely something to think about. But we'll get more into that later. These are just like the first impressions of these characters. There's a lot more to them that we'll unpack as the story goes on.
Right, okay. So we have a potentially interesting group of characters, a pretty familiar dystopian world, and a very bold writing style. So should people keep reading?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about more in part 2. We'll dive deeper into the characters and their relationships and see if the story itself can live up to the hype or, the criticism.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back with part 2 of our Shatter Me deep dive. After a quick word from our sponsors. And we're back with part 2 of our deep dive into Shatter Me.
So, as a reminder, we're trying to figure out if this book is worth your time. And so far, it seems like it could go either way. It's aimed at people who like dystopian YA romances. But even people who love that genre are divided on it.
Right, and we've talked a bit about that writing style.
Yeah, the writing style. That seems like it's a big part of why people either love it or hate it.
Yeah, for sure. That writing style is a huge part of the whole experience of reading this book.
Okay, so can you give me an example? Like something that really shows why some people love it and why some people just can't stand it. Okay, so there's this line. Hate looks like everybody else until it smiles, until it spins around and lies with lips and teeth carved into semblance of something too passive to punch.
Okay, wow. That is a lot. I can see how that would be really off-putting to some people.
Yeah, and then there's this other one. I catch the rose petals as they fall from my cheeks, as they float around the frame of my body, as they cover me in something that feels like the absence of courage.
Okay, yeah, so that one is very descriptive.
Yeah.
But is it too much? Like, is it effective or is it just melodramatic?
I mean, it depends on the reader, right? Some people will think it's beautiful and poetic, and other people will think it's just too much.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
And then remember those strike-throughs we talked about. She uses those throughout the entire book to show Juliette's thoughts and feelings that she's trying to suppress.
Right, yeah. But like I said before, I'm not convinced that's anything more than a gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, some readers think it adds a lot of depth to Juliette's character, but others just find it annoying.
Right, okay. So we've talked about the writing. And like you said, it really just comes down to personal preference. So let's move on to the story itself. Like, what actually happens?
Okay, so like we said, it's a dystopian novel. And it follows Juliette, this girl who can kill people with her touch. And she's been locked up for years because people are afraid of her power. So she's really traumatized and doesn't really know how to deal with her powers. And then when she escapes, she's thrown into this world of rebellion. And she has to learn to control her powers while also, navigating all these relationships.
Right, and we talked about the love triangle.
Yeah.
With Adam, the childhood friend.
Yeah.
And Warner, the son of the evil leader. So what are those relationships actually like?
So Juliette and Adam, they have this connection because of their shared trauma. And, Adam was one of the only people who wasn't afraid of Juliette. And he could actually touch her without getting hurt.
Right, because he's immune to her powers.
Yeah, exactly. So he represents, safety and security for her.
You said that some people think their relationship is kind of unrealistic?
Yeah, it's definitely
Insta-love.
Yeah, exactly.
And Adam can seem kind of boring compared to Warner.
Right.
So what about Warner? Why is he so appealing, even though he's kind of a bad guy?
Yeah, I mean, Warner's a really complicated character.
Yeah.
He's definitely manipulative.
Yeah.
And controlling.
Uh-oh.
But he also sees something in Juliette that other people don't.
Okay.
He pushes her to accept her powers and to question everything she thinks she knows.
I can see how that would be attractive to some people.
Yeah.
But it also sounds a little dangerous.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There are definitely some scenes that are
red flag.
Yeah, exactly.
So is this one of those books that romanticizes toxic relationships?
That's a really good question. And it's definitely something we need to talk about. Whether or not the book addresses those issues is something that people debate a lot.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot to unpack here. We've got a complex love triangle, a unique writing style, and a plot that seems pretty similar to other dystopian novels.
Right.
So should people read it?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss in part 3. We'll dive deeper into those themes we've talked about, like identity and power. And we'll try to figure out if Shatter Me ultimately lives up to the hype.
Okay, awesome. Can't wait to find out. We'll be right back with part 3. after this break.
Okay, so we're back. And I've got to say, this book is a lot more than I thought it would be. Like, we talked about that writing style and that love triangle.
Yeah.
And the dystopian world. But I want to know more about those deeper themes you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the biggest themes in this book is identity. Juliet's trying to figure out who she is.
Yeah.
And not just because she has these powers, but because everyone has always told her she's a monster.
Right. So, like,
Yeah, sorry.
she doesn't fit in.
Exactly. And that's something that a lot of readers really connect with, especially, with teenagers. They know what it's like to feel isolated and different and like you don't belong. So they see themselves in Juliette.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So what other themes make this book, so emotionally powerful?
Yeah.
Well, another big one is power. The book explores how power can be good or bad, and how even good people can be corrupted by it. And so Juliette's journey is really about learning to control her own power, both literally, because of her powers, but also metaphorically. She has to overcome her own fears and insecurities to actually become who she's meant to be.
Right. So it's not just about finding love. It's about finding yourself.
Exactly. Like, even though there's this whole love triangle thing going on,
Yeah.
ultimately Shatter Me is about Juliette figuring out who she is and, finding her voice and fighting for what she believes in and just breaking free from all the constraints that society puts on her.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm starting to get why people love this book so much, even though it's not perfect.
Yeah, exactly. It's about real stuff like
Yeah.
mental health and abuse.
Yes.
And, figuring out who you are and how to use your power for good.
So even though the writing might be a little weird and the relationships might be a little messy, it's still a book that makes you think
Right.
and feel things.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so popular.
Okay, so final verdict. Should people read this book or what?
I mean, it really depends what you're looking for. Like, if you're looking for a perfect book with perfect characters and a perfect plot, this is not it.
Right.
But if you want something that's going to make you feel things and maybe even change the way you see the world, then yeah, you should definitely check it out.
I love that. Like, it's not just entertainment.
Right.
It's an experience.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive helped you decide if Shatter Me is something you want to read. And if it is, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll be back next time with another book and another deep dive. So until then, happy reading.